Today on the Stay Visionary podcast, we're joined by Elyssa Goldstein, a distinguished legal operations leader who rose from the front desk receptionist to become COO of RAM Law and serves as president-elect of the Association of Legal Administrators with deep experience turning law firm management into a strategic differentiator. Elyssa will walk us through her journey, how she built operational excellence in a high stakes personal injury firm, and how AI emerging technologies are reshaping legal services. Welcome. And as always, tell us your story, how you started. It's, to me, an amazing story, but I'll let you take the floor.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. I really appreciate it.
Walk us through your career journey from starting as a receptionist to becoming COO of RAM Law.
Sure. So the story usually begins outside of legal. When you wind up in these non-lawyer careers, most people don't aspire to be in legal management, and that wasn't the case with me either. So I went to school undergrad at Hofstra University in Long Island for music performance. I wanted to be a famous musician. I play the piano, write songs, sing, and somehow conned again my loving parents into letting me do that in college and paying for it. When I got out of school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, in the end, a music career just wasn't it for me, or at least, not beyond the walls of my, homes. So I decided to take a job as a receptionist. My mom knew of a law firm that was looking to hire. She said, "You're pretty good with people. You're good on the phones. You're comfortable. Why don't you give it a shot? At least it'll be some stability." So I went in on my first day. This is back in 2009, thinking, oh, how hard could it be to answer the phones? It's harder than you'd think when you're keeping, client names and important deadlines and, lots of different partner priorities in order. But I was lucky that the manager that I had at the time, in addition to, putting me on the phones and making sure I was trained well there, noticed that I, had an interest or an acumen for doing some other things. So she came to me pretty early on and said, "Elyssa, if you're interested in learning more about, this side of a law firm, I'm happy to teach you. Or you can sit here and be bored." And that's not something I wanted to do. So I learned from her, as much as I possibly could. And uh, to make a very long story short, in that part of the time, law firms merge, people get let go. They don't think they need someone in charge. Eventually, they find out they do and decide that person's going to be me. It was probably a combination of maybe a cheaper salary, maybe some energy. I certainly didn't know what I needed to know at the time, but I guess they felt that they had the confidence in me to put me in that leadership role. So I worked very hard to study and learn as much as I possibly could about managing other people, especially since I was colleagues with these people one day, and continued to rise through the ranks, taking on different positions, eventually moving law firms a few times, as one does. And ultimately, I wound up here at Ram Law in February of 2018. I came in with a title of firm administrator. And around this time last year, I was promoted to chief operating officer, or COO. So again, like you said, started from the reception desk, went all the way up through a series of events that would really be the whole podcast, but that's kind of the as much abridged version as I can. So it just was a lot of hard work and a lot of also people, looking out for me and making sure that when the opportunities arose, they were putting my name forward, which I very much appreciate.
Well, it seems you were believed in from the beginning, from your mentor taking you on, saying, "Hey, we think you have some potential here." But you also went out and did the work. You got certifications. And what role did that play in really accelerating your move into management?
I mean, it was critical. So when I was promoted that into that first managerial position, that was back in February of 2013. So it's almost been 13 years now, doing this side of law firms. And I immediately was told by my mother and some other colleagues, because my mom also is in law, at least until next week when she retires, good for her. They told me to join this organization called the Association of Legal Administrators. And as you mentioned in my intro, I'm blessed to be the president elect of that organization now. But I joined right away. There are state or local chapters, as well as an international organization that caters to, all the chapters in the United States, as well as some chapters in Canada and Mexico. And that organization has been critical for me in my knowledge. It puts on a lot of educational conferences and releases a magazine and has webinars and networking groups and meetups and all sorts of opportunities to expand my skill set. So I think it was a combination of on the job training. Again, you mentioned that particular mentor, other bosses, other, even staff members who've taught me different things over the years, attorneys who've explained litigation procedure to me, as well as that organization, as well as SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management. A big piece of my job does involve human resources, though there's finances and operations and all other things as well. So, really, really the ALA, but certainly SHRM and the other organizations, that I've been blessed to kind of be a part of and work on both at the local level and at the national or international levels have been critical.
Yeah, because even though it's a good sized law firm, they're not corporations. So you do have to know the different aspects and kind of actually everything, right? I mean, you have to know.
I think it's important to be well-rounded. There is merit in being a subject matter expert. And there are, firms much larger than us that have much more defined roles or streamlined positions. And I've done a lot of, billing and finance earlier in my career. That's kind of was the first really promotion or direction that I was heading into before I moved to general management. But I think in these small firms, which, were maybe teetering between small and mid-sized, depending on who you ask, there's usually one of me, maybe two, if you're lucky, some other person assisting in a managerial way. So it's important that you be well-rounded and understand how the business runs. If there's sort of a gap in my knowledge or an area that I'm not that strong in, that I'm not serving the firm well. So there will be times where, I'm big on continuing education. I haven't stopped. Again, you mentioned certifications, just like attorneys have continuing credits. I do as well for the three certifications I hold. So it's constant learning and development and making sure that if there's, something new we're looking to take on, that I'm getting educated in that space.
It's a lot to take on, and a lot of people don't realize, the amount you have to take on this role, especially becoming COO. Now, with Ram's vision of the firm's operations and culture, how did you align with the founding partner's vision?
Sure. So, when I came on board to this firm, there were three partners at the time, and now there's five. And we had a lot of conversations about getting to know each other, different philosophies on work styles, what each partner would handle. We don't have at this point five now partners involved in every single sector of the business. One focuses on marketing, and one focuses on case assignments, and one focuses on finance, and so on and so forth. So it was, making sure I understood each person's language. As the firm has grown, and maybe about 3 years ago, we knew we got to a point where we really needed to not only have a vision that we shared at the management level, but make sure that we were projecting that out to our team. So what we did was an exercise at one of our training days. We sat down with a list of maybe 50 or 60 common core values, and we asked everyone in the firm to rank their top core values. And we took those answers and compiled them and came out with a few that we felt, again, were representative of the majority, but also truly reflective of our firm. Accountability and teamwork, experience, client support, dedication, things like that, that really, really spoke to how we were going to service our firm, be good stewards of the profession, and so on and so forth. So I think that exercise aligning that vision even further was really important. Again, we had those top level conversations, which was great when the firm is small, but as the firm continues to grow, it's if you have a vision that's not shared with anyone, then there's no way to action upon that and make sure that it's actually, coming to fruition. So that exercise involving the whole firm to really define what our core values were and, how we were going to put them into practice was, I think, critical. And we now to this day have a core values a monthly award. So if someone has demonstrated, gone sort of above and beyond their job description to really do something that enhances our core values and the spirit of our firm, their colleagues can nominate them anonymously, and we give out a reward, every month. And it's great when we get to do those. I'm sad in a month where nobody's done anything or nobody's nominated, but typically if we have 12 months in the year, we have 8 or 9 different months where somebody's getting that core values award and kind of sharing it with the firm, and again, getting celebrated for living what we say we're going to.
And what else are you doing to implement those core values in the vision?
I think it's just being truthful about the best way to serve the community. We am I heavy-handedly discussing them every single day with people? No, but I think we know what our limitations are, what our strengths are, where our opportunities lie, and by kind of communicating things in those ways to people and then modeling that good behavior, we can be again good, the best lawyers around, and then good stewards of the community, which I think is really, really important. Right before Thanksgiving, we partner with a local soup kitchen here in our New Brunswick, New Jersey area called Elijah's Promise. And the firm, we shut down operations for a couple hours, walked down the street, went over to the soup kitchen. We were preparing different meals that they were going to be served. I think they said 2,700 meals we prepared when we were there. I can't remember the
That
exact
is
number, but
that is
somewhere in that
incredible.
range. So again, it's easy, a lot of the times to say we're going to do these things,
Right.
but it's one thing to actually do it. We could write checks left and right. Oh, we're going to donate to this, we're going to donate to that, our name's going to be on a sign. That's all well and good, right? Advertising, seeing logos and things like that certainly works. Otherwise there wouldn't be billboards, of our competitors up and down the highway. But actually getting out there and making a difference, shows that we will make a difference when we bring those clients in too.
Excellent. Excellent. That is something the soup kitchen,
We
not
love
too
it.
many law firms, especially, will go out and bring everyone. That's a great story. Going on to RAM law, you guys have a strong niche in truck accident litigation and high stakes personal injury. How does your firm's operational infrastructure support such complex high liability cases?
I think initially when we decided to kind of move into that sector, and we also do institutional sex abuse cases as well. So I would say that, the truck accidents and the sex abuse are kind of our two really niche and specialty areas. We took on those areas because we felt that we could lend something to the field. One of our partners who kind of leads our trucking department actually went out and got his CDL, so that he could know,
Really?
okay, this is how a truck operates. This is what I need to be doing. Here are the regulations. Here's what's safe. Here are the complications people can run into. The sex abuse, I'm not quite sure of the origin there and why it spoke to someone. Perhaps it had to do with a religious upbringing, and this is purely speculation. I don't know for sure, but I think, it was an area that was very important to one, and now two of our partners, about helping those, victims and making sure that they got their justice. We were the first firm to kind of bring those lawsuits in New Jersey. So to have the infrastructure, and to go back to your question, is a first to have the desire to really make a difference in that area. This is such a crowded, competitive field, personal injury, really all across the nation, not just here in New Jersey where we're located. But you need differentiators. You need people who are dedicated, constantly learning and growing. And I think not just resting on our laurels, but, being willing to take on new subject matter, for lack of a better term, and get educated in those spaces was really, really important. The sex abuse team partnered with a firm in Seattle that had been doing this a lot longer because they were the subject matter experts out there. And we wanted to bring them in and make sure, again, that we knew what we were doing before we entered that space. We have
Excellent.
a team of staff members dedicated to the trucking work. We actually call it commercial motor vehicle work because it could be buses or cargo vans, things like that too. Not overwhelming the staff members with too many different areas also allows them to develop their expertise, and hone their skills in that area. I think a lot of times people take on new sectors of business and they can get very watered down, and they're not really doing the right number of cases, or they're not really putting the right resources in place for their staff members to learn. And I think that is something that we've done really, really well, is not being shy about sharing that knowledge. It's great if our staff members can check something off a list and get a job done. If they don't understand the whys and hows of what they're doing, they're not going to be invested in it. And I think that has been a big part of it too, is taking on areas of interest and then making sure that they become areas of expertise in addition.
How do you go about doing that?
With regard to the staff,
Yes.
most people aren't going to come in and say, yes, I'm an expert in commercial motor vehicle, personal injury, or institutional sex abuse. But it is the same thing, I would say, that happened to me. I try to look for, when we're hiring a paralegal, you want someone with paralegal experience. But if you're hiring an administrative assistant, and I just went through a round of hiring here, so I can speak to it really well. A lot of the times you're asking for someone who's going to come in, do a lot of administrative tasks on files, who will have no law firm experience. But you want to look for someone who has that potential, who has that desire to learn. A lot of the times I hear, and it may seem silly, oh, I want to work in a law firm because I like, Law and Order, or I like CSI, things like that. But that's helpful. That at least shows that there's an interest, that something has sparked in them. Or, I've always thought about being a lawyer. It's cool. My grandpa was a lawyer. Okay, great. Come on in, see what you can do. The people who are the most successful here are not always the people who've got years and years of experience and technical knowledge. It's the people who are really team players, who are willing to buy in, who are willing to work hard, who are willing to learn, and really give their all to the cases. We don't have our teams working these crazy hours. They really work their 35 hours. That's what we do here. And they go home. But when they're here, they are locked in and they are invested in what they do because we've supported them, from the jump. Again, we've sort of cultivated that interest and backed it up with the appropriate training and education and things like that. So it can be tricky. Again, we can't always find the people who know this stuff really well, but we're confident that if we get someone with the right mindset in, that our training will bring them to where they need to be.
Excellent. So moving on, what are the top three operational challenges you face as a COO of a growing trial firm, and how did you address them?
I mean, it's always, hiring the right people, right? We just spoke about that. I
Correct.
don't bat 1,000. No one bats 1,000. There are times where you think someone's going to be a good fit and they turn out not to be. And then can't be hesitant to make a change. Again, you're not changing it like you change your clothes, right? But if someone's not a fit, sometimes it can be, I don't want to upset the apple cart, or giving them too long a leash. I think we've found the right balance of, okay, this person has been here long enough, they should know, and they're not picking it up and we need to make a change. Or we're usually much better about this, but if heaven forbid there was a personality fit, we're going to make that change too. So I think the right staff in place is super, super important because it's competitive out there, and people are looking for a lot of different things, and you never know what will pique someone's interest in the job market. Although it's not a challenge for us, I think something that is always top of mind for us, and is top of mind in all law firms, is really budgeting and finances. In a personal injury law firm, something that is unique, you often hear attorneys, the billable hour, the billable hour. We don't have a billable hour. We don't bill. We operate entirely on contingency. So if we settle a case, we get our third. If we go to trial and we get our verdict, we get our third. And if, we lose or we don't get a good settlement, that is on us if we don't get enough money to recover our expenses, or if we don't get any money, if we've lost a trial, taking that risk and it hasn't paid off, those are inherently things that we have to worry about. So managing cash flow, budgeting, again, being mindful of how we're pacing throughout the year is very, very important. But we sit down, I mentioned that one partner in particular kind of handles finances. We have two bookkeepers, myself. We just sat down earlier this week and kind of did our year end outlook and things like that, making sure that we were on track with our budgeting from last year, which, we were finalizing projections for next year, and being mindful of where we want to go, so that we're not, overspending in one area, and then unable to really support the firm the way it needs to be in another. Third challenge. Hmm. Well, for us personally, it's space. We own two out of three of our office locations, and because the firm has continued to grow, we're almost at max capacity. So figuring out where we're going to put people, where we want to set up shop, making sure that we, again, if we go into a community, we want to be able to partner with the community and be good representatives. As I mentioned before, we're not just going
Right.
to set up an office. We want to make sure there's opportunities for us to give back. So, all those things will be concerns going forward. And for firms in general, other friends, some firms are consolidating space. They have more people working remotely. We have some of that here, some certain relationships in a few days a week, but generally most of our people are in the office. So we've got to have, space for them to be able to work comfortably as well.
Excellent. In the context of legal operations, how do you evaluate new technologies and decide which ones to adopt at Ram Law?
This is a good question because we just went through an exercise, bringing on something in about April or May of this year. So, AI, right, is a very, very, very hot topic right now, and there is a proliferation of AI products on the market for law firms, as well as law firm legal software in general. Legal tech is forever booming. It can be very easy to get swept up in, looking at something. Oh, this looks cool. This is great. But for us, we kind of reverse engineer it. We block out the noise of all the programs first, and we think about what is the most critical area of our business where we could really use an upgrade in our technology, and or an automation, something that could help us process, improve, streamline workflows. So what we came up with, and what is a big, onus in the personal injury field, is the review of medical records. Thousands and thousands of pages can come in. To consolidate them, to put them in chronology, a timeline, is very, very arduous for our staff. They are good at it. They can do it well, but we knew that there was products being developed out on the market, to help us with this. Again, everything's got to be double and triple checked, by a human eye, a trained eye. But there's been a lot of developments and enhancements in that technology. So knowing that that was our primary need, we were easily able to filter out some of the noise from companies that really didn't focus on that, or maybe, oh, we're just dipping our toe in, but we really do XYZ. Again, we didn't want to get caught up in a fad, and or something that really wasn't helpful to us. So knowing what our actual problem was, or the particular issue that we wanted to solve for, we were then able to narrow our focus and look at companies that really were leaders in that space. Testing out things, having conversations. A lot of those things are spearheaded by me. Those initial introductions, those evaluations. Sometimes I can tell right away that they really haven't done their research, maybe even talked to law firms in general, and they're being purely speculative about what we may need or how things might look, and I can eliminate some of that. And then once we get into the final few choices, I'll bring in, again, usually not all five, but a couple of partners to ask certain legal questions and things that I just may not have even crossed my mind, because I'm not a lawyer, and that's not the way that I think, or that's
Right.
not the way I would engage in the software. And ultimately, we made a decision to partner with a company, like I said, back in the spring. And every day since has been us really giving our best effort. There's been hesitancy. People are trying to figure out how they want to use it, but I, have regular meetings with the company. We're attending webinars. We're hosting our own internal little lunch and learns or quick roundtables or sessions. I think it was last Friday. Yeah, we got the whole firm together just for an hour over Zoom. Okay, here's a couple of tips I picked up, or here's a roadblock I ran into with the AI software. Here's how I solved it. And again, not being afraid to push out that education. If you are evaluating new tech and you bring it
Absolutely.
on and people aren't bought in, and then you're not constantly training your people, what is the point? You've spent money on something now that no one is going to use.
Absolutely. You have to be responsible.
And it's hard to be because you don't want to be left behind, right? There will be firms that will get left behind if they're not using this type of
Yes.
technology. But I think we really went about it methodically, um, to make sure, again, that what we brought in was going to be something that was really beneficial for us. And we're still learning. We have a lot to go with this. Ultimately, who knows? We may not stick with it. We may find that there's another business need, or somebody out there that we weren't aware of the first time. Did I speak to every single company on the market that does this? It would be impossible to even know. But I really, that is one area where I constantly have to stay educated because it changes so rapidly. Finance, how to balance the books, what a trust account is, that doesn't change all that much. Maybe there's a rule, every once in a while
Regulation.
that comes through. But when it comes to tech, that is an ever moving target.
Yeah, especially with AI, it's moving so fast now. If you're not constantly in it, it's really hard to keep up.
It's hard to keep up if you're in it, please. Yeah.
And in general, with law, keeping up with that in general is hard. But then you add the tech into it, and it just combines it. That's why you have to be responsible, as you said. Really doing your due diligence. Looking ahead, the next 6 months to a year, what are your biggest growth plans for Ram Law in terms of people, offices, service operations, and how will technology support that growth?
I think I mentioned joining the firm back in 2018 February, so it'll be 8 years this coming February, and we have incrementally grown by a few people each year. I think one of the smart things we do at our firm is when our associate attorneys get to maybe about 80 cases, we say, up, well, if everybody's at 80 cases, our partners have a little bit less because they're out doing a little bit more of the rainmaking. But if we get to that level, uh, we need to think about hiring another lawyer. So actually, in the past year, we brought on 3 lawyers, which was a big jump for us to go from 8 to 11. 2 new associate attorneys and one of counsel attorney who has a specialty in medical malpractice work. So it is keeping an eye on those case numbers. Those numbers are continuing to increase even with the new people. So it's possible that there could be an addition of another lawyer or two, maybe later in the year, in 2026, if not, into 2027. Obviously, you have to hire staff members. We try to be mindful again. Some law firms, I don't know how they do it. They'll have one paralegal for 6 attorneys. We do maybe 1 or 2 here. We have small teams, small reporting relationships again, so that people have the time to do their work. So
So there could be burnout.
yes, yes. I think there's the work itself is hard. It is hard to work in a law firm. It is hard to work with plaintiff personal injury clients who have experienced, some of the worst times in their life, serious injuries, God forbid, a passing of a family member. The abuse cases are something in and of itself that I can't even wrap my head around. What those particular individuals have been through. So if we have staff, like you said, who are completely burned out, completely overwhelmed, attorneys who have way too many cases to even keep on top of, the clients can sense that and they know they're not getting the best support. So I think for us, it would be growing that, really looking about keeping our case structure the way that we want it, and hiring more people if needed. We also try to look at case value. Something that I hear one of my partners say a lot is that, I'd rather let someone know from the beginning hey, we're not the right firm for you. We're only going to be able to get you this, or we're not going to be able to spend the time on X, and have somebody be mad at me up front versus be mad at me at the end. It's so smart every time I hear him say that. So we want to make sure that, again, if we've got experts in particular areas, that they're spending their time focusing on those areas of expertise, and we're not just taking every case that walks through the door. That's not going to be us. We're not that type
I
of
think
firm.
I think people appreciate the honesty up front than getting near the end and they're not getting the result that
For
they were
sure.
expecting.
There are very few people who are really mad up front that we're not taking their case. We have a great referral relationships with a lot of other PI firms and attorneys in other fields as well. Because we have certified attorneys, we're able to make those referrals and again, set up our clients well, but also set us up for referral fees and things like that. That is a big part of our business, referrals in, referrals out as well, because we really, our goal is to serve the person. So if we know right away, we're not the right place, we're gonna send people out. So again, for us, I think it's growing incrementally in the next year, making sure that we've got the right people in place, and then keeping an eye on that tech, as we talked about. Is the product that we have now, are we continuing to use it to its capacity, learn on new tips and tricks, optimize our workflows? Is there something else we need to add in addition? Is there something else we need to replace it with entirely that'll do what it does, but also do the addition without having us do, 10 different pieces of software? You don't want to get too watered down where you've got so many things that people don't even remember what does what. So those are probably the top two things that I need to keep an eye on always, is the right amount of staff and the right amount of tech to support that staff.
Like you said, AI is everybody's, I got to get AI, I got to get AI, but doing it responsibly and doing it the right way is, and having what we found is law firms, medical practices, you name it, it's across the board. They're I got to get AI, and they're getting some different AI products, but then nothing, they're not getting the efficiency, and you have to have it connecting. So one is talking to the other to really get the maximum effect in the productivity.
Agreed.
For law firm leaders listening today, what is one piece of advice you give about creating a future ready operation, especially for firms looking to stay ahead in an increasing automated, data driven legal environment?
I think firms that are looking to stay ahead from that, business and operations sector, need to have someone like me in place. Attorneys are great. Our attorneys are great attorneys. They are good businessmen too, but that is not the case in every firm. There
No.
are attorneys who know their job cold, who are zealous advocates, who are really amazing, but that business side is where they misstep. It can be scary when your name is on the door to turn over a big piece of your business to someone from the outside, right? I'm not a partner. I'm not getting a cut of anything in that respect. It's not my law license on the line. But if you have the right person in place, they should operate, as I try to do, as if my name's on the door, as if my job is on the line, as if my, professional reputation is on the line. I try to operate as if I am a partner, because that is what I want to give back to the firm. So it's having that open dialogue to say, hey, this is what I think. Okay, no, you don't feel that way. Can we meet in the middle? Or is this something you're going to overrule me on? Here's what I'm seeing from the outside. My partners depend on me to say, here's what another firm is doing, or here's a trend, or here's something that I think you should keep an eye on. Here's something that I saw at a conference. If I'm keeping all that knowledge to myself, I mean, I'm helping no one. So the firms that I think really want to grow need to make sure that they've got someone running that business side, as at a high and optimized level as possible. And if they don't have someone, or if they've got a collection of partners just trying to patchwork it together, and they don't know where to begin, then they've got to go to a consultant. There are a lot of great consultants that I know out there who can find the right person for you versus just putting out an ad. That can be really, really hard. And it can be hard to build that trust right away when you've never done something like that before. But I think it's critical to, empower someone in your firm to help you make those business decisions so that you can get back to, what you went to school for.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for sharing your insights and real world experience with us. We're excited to see how you and Ram Law continue to innovate in legal operations, talent development, and high impact litigation. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this episode with anyone passionate about innovation, leadership, and the future of intelligent automation. I'm Ed Moran, and as always, stay visionary.